In the book of Hebrews in the 11th chapter, in verse 20, by faith Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau, even regarding things to come. That's in Genesis 27, 26 to 40. By faith Jacob, as he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph, and worshipped, leaning on his staff. So he blessed each of the sons of Joseph. That's in Genesis 48, 1 to 22, and it says, leaning on the top of his, what is that? Staff. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 21. So, he always has something in his hand. Joseph always has something in his hand. What did he have in the book of Genesis in the 25th chapter? 25th chapter. In verse 25, Genesis 25, 26, he had his brother's heel in his hand. What does it mean to have somebody's heel in your hand? Huh? What? It means to constantly be in a place where you want to trip him. You want to trip him. You go for someone's heel, meaning you are wanting to trip him. You are wanting to cause him to stumble. You are wanting to cause him to fall. Correct? Yes or no? Now in Hebrews chapter 11, he is not having his brother's heel. He is having a staff in his hand. Maybe someone caught his heel at some point. You understand that? This is how God weakens the believer in the way. This is how God weakens us in the way. So we have now his return back to the land where he came from. In verse chapter 30, 25, send me away that I may go to my own place and to my own country. The terms of agreement here verse 34 to 36. When Jacob spoke to him, verse 31, what shall I give you? Verse 26 of chapter 30, give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, and let me depart, for you yourselves know my service which I have rendered you. Laban recognizes in verse 27 of chapter 30 that he was blessed on account of on account of Jacob. He recognizes that he was blessed on account of Jacob. Chapter 30 verse 27. So he said, name me your wages and I will give it to you. Now he's not asking for wages. What is he asking for? His wives and his children. He's asking for his wives and children. Laban is saying, tell me your wages. Because Laban knows the longer Jacob stays, the more Laban is going to be blessed. Laban knows the more longer Jacob stays, the more he is going to be blessed, because God is with him. You yourself know how I have served you and how your cattle have fed with me. For you had little before I came. Now he's trying to dig in. You had very little before I came, and it has increased to a multitude, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I turned. Remember this, the Lord has blessed you wherever I turned. But now, when shall I provide for my own household also? Now he is kind of, when Laban knows that Jacob is a little serious about his decision, then he is saying this, what shall I give you? He says here, you shall not give me anything. If you will do this one thing for me, I will again pasture and keep your flock. Let me pass through your entire flock today, removing from there every speckled and spotted sheep and every black one among the lambs, and the spotted and the speckled among the goats, and such shall be my wages. So let me remove all that is speckled and spotted. Let my honesty answer for me later when you come concerning my wages. Everyone that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and black among the lambs, if found with me, will be considered stolen. So he said, everyone that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and black among the lambs, if not found with me, will be considered. Laban said, let it be according to your word. So he removed on that day the striped and the spotted male goats, and all the speckled and the spotted female goats, every one with white in it, and all the black ones among the sheep, and gave them into the care of his sons. That's what Laban did. Verse 34-35. And he put a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flock. Now this is how much Laban trusted Jacob, his son-in-law. He trusted him enough to put a distance of 3 days' journey away. Isn't it wonderful? In verse 36. Now Jacob introduced a manner of breeding in 37-38. So Laban separated the off-colored animals so as to reduce Jacob's chances of acquiring a large herd. What did he do? He separated off-colored animals to reduce Jacob's chances of acquiring a large herd. But those animals not visibly spotted had latent genes that would produce spotted offsprings. Those animals that were not spotted had genes that would produce spotted offerings. Jacob was a very smart man. And we see here in verse 41, in the whole aspect of reproduction, in verse 43, the man became exceedingly prosperous and had large flocks and female and male servants and camels and donkeys. Now, whenever there is the Lord present with his people, it does not matter what the strategy of the enemy is like. Whenever there is the presence of the Lord with his people, whenever there is an approval of God upon a person, it does not matter what the strategy of the enemy is like. Now, was Job in a right relationship with God when Job faced the trials in Job 1 and 2? Was Job in a right relationship with God when Job faced the trials in Job chapter 1 and 2? Yes or no? God testified that Job was a man that was full of integrity. God testified. Then why is it that God allowed Job to be tested even though he was a man that held fast to his own integrity? Twice God confessed that about Job's life in Job chapter 1 and Job chapter 2. Why does God have to listen to the suggestion of the devil? in Job chapter 1 and Job chapter 2. Why does he have two? Number one, God must deal with forms of pride in the human heart. God must deal with forms of pride in the human heart. And number two, God must produce humility instead of the pride that was there to produce virtue. Now, God must dethrone pride if he has to enthrone humility, and humility is the only prerequisite for virtue. Is that clear? God wants to produce virtue in us. Virtue is defined as divine excellence. It is the nature of God. It is the nature of God that is transferred to man. It is imparted righteousness. What is it? It is imparted righteousness is practical righteousness that is manifested in daily living. Imparted righteousness is practical righteousness that is imparted in daily living. Jacob, there is a kind of confidence that he is revealing in his life because he knows that Laban is being weakened. Laban is being weakened as a person, and Jacob is being strengthened as a person. Therefore, Laban is recognizing if Jacob parts, then he wouldn't have much as he could have, and therefore he is trying his best. He is trying his best to retain Jacob. So we see here that Jacob in verse 37 to 43 of chapter 30 practiced selective breeding in verse 40 to 42, and he attributed this prosperity to the intervention of God in 31:7 and 31:9. He is attributing this to God. There is a shift that is taking place in Jacob's life. There is a shift that is taking place in Jacob's life because he knows now that it has to be God because it cannot be himself. Sometimes God has us in that place where it has to be him because it cannot be us. Abraham had to be in this place where it was completely God and not himself. Is that clear? Abraham was put in the place where it was completely God and not in himself. Israel, as they come out in the next chapter through Egypt, it has to be totally God. It cannot be himself. Now, it is God completely and totally when we are in a position of relying and depending only on him. In Psalm 62 verse 5, my soul waits only for him, and my expectation is only of him. Is that clear? There comes a time in our lives where this whole conniving business and deceiving business and speculation and presumption and subjectivity all have to come to a halt. There comes a time in our life where to presume, in Psalm 19, the last few verses, speculation. If you deliver me, I will give you 1/10. All our hypothesis, our presumption, our speculation, our own subjectivity, the promptings of the human heart, etc., they all one day must come to a stop. And Psalm 62 verse 5 must take over in our lives. We are waiting in expectation, but as we wait, we are being renewed in Isaiah 40, 28 to 31. So now, Jacob is hearing some things. There is a legitimate blessing that has come upon Jacob. This is not a blessing that has come through deception. And now the sons of Laban are very upset. This is what they say: Jacob has taken away all that was our father's, and from what belonged to our father he has made all his wealth. This is it. But Jacob's response to his wife in chapter 31 verse 9 is this: God has taken away your father's livestock and given them to me. Remember this? This is the interpretation. This is the interpretation of those that have no understanding of how God takes away from one person and gives it to the other. Who took away the kingdom from Saul and gave it to David? David's six brothers before him. God took away the kingdom. Why did God take away the kingdom from Saul? In 1 Samuel chapter 15, it's very clearly mentioned. He did something. To obey is better than sacrifice. God said to Saul after that through Samuel, God has taken away the kingdom from you and he has given it to somebody else. Here we see Jacob has taken away all that was our father's, and from what belonged to our father he has made all his wealth. But in verse 7, verse 9, God has taken away your father's livestock and given to me. There is an interpretation there between the sons of Laban and Jacob himself. The sons of Laban are seeing what Jacob has. The sons of Laban are seeing what Jacob has, and they are comparing what he has in the light of what they have. They are comparing, and they make a comparison, and the comparison brings them to this conclusion that Jacob has stolen something from Laban. Is that correct? That is not correct. Jacob has not stolen anything from Laban. God has basically prospered him. God has prospered him. See, this is the issue here. Number one, when we are in bondage, the enemy will sustain us. When we are in bondage, the enemy will sustain us. But the moment we basically start experiencing our deliverance, the enemy no longer sustains us. The enemy starts beginning to accuse us. Is that clear? As long as Jacob was under Laban, as long as Jacob submitted to Laban, as long as Jacob did everything that Laban said, it was all okay. But the moment Jacob decided that he's going to make a decision in faith, he's going to step out in faith. Enough is enough. I've served this man for 20 years. Now I'm going to make a step of faith. And the moment he makes that decision, God intervenes in his life because it was a decision of faith. It was a decision of faith. God is looking to see whether we want to settle down in our condition of bondage and be sustained, or we are going to step out in faith and experience adventure. God wants Jacob to step out because God wants reconciliation with Esau. The 20 years of being with Laban has not caused Jacob to forget Esau. You understand? Stepping out in faith helps us to deal with the very issues that we are not comfortable with. Stepping out in faith causes us to deal with the issues that we are not very comfortable with. Many times a person is comfortable by living a lifestyle of being in the second class compartment of the Indian Railways, when he has privileged status to fly executive class by any airline in the world. But the person doesn't know that this is what God is preparing for him or her, because he is not willing to step out in faith. So Jacob is making some decisions, and now he is basically doing something. The Lord is speaking to him once again in verse 3 of chapter 31. What is it? Now Jacob is not having human counselors. The Lord is directly intervening. Now this word Lord is the word Yahweh. When Yahweh is mentioned, it's always connected with a relationship or a covenant. Okay? Now he's saying, I want you to return. I want you to return. I will be with you. This is all that we need to know when we have to make a decision. In chapter 31 verse 3, this is all we need to know when we have to make a decision. He does not need Laban's pledges anymore. He does not need what? Jesus Christ in his humanity had to time and time again recognize that his disciples were called to him. The disciples were not to promote him. Let me say it again. The disciples were called into his ministry, but disciples were not there to promote his ministry. What did Jesus do? Jesus totally committed himself into his Father's hands. When he died on the cross, one of the 7 sayings of Christ was, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. On the earth, he committed himself to the Father's plan, and he consummated it when he died, and he gave up his spirit to the Father. This was total consecration. When we are in this place where we enter into consecration, we allow God to be all in our lives. In Colossians chapter 3, 1 Corinthians 15:28, for God is all in all. So, he is speaking to his family. He is telling them the truth in verse 7. He is telling them this is what is happening. God has taken away. Your father cheated me, changed my wages 10 times. However, God did not allow him to hurt me. This is exactly important. God did not allow him to hurt me. This is what God told Satan, don't touch. You can do what you want to him, but don't touch his life. God has taken away your father's livestock and given them to me. In verse 9, very clearly mentioned. And now we see here in 31, God is leading Jacob. Now he has something that he sees here. Verse 11. In a dream, he said to Jacob, God said, and he said, here I am. And he gives him a vision in verse 10 and 12 about what will happen. When the flock were mating, I lifted my eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the male goats which were mating were striped, speckled, and mottled. Lift up your eyes and see all that the male goats which are mating are striped, speckled, mottled. For I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. God is saying, I am seeing the affliction that is upon my people. I'm seeing this affliction. I'm not going to be somebody that is going to allow this to go unnoticed. The cry of the affliction of Israel in chapter 3 of the book of Exodus, it went up to God. Now he says in verse 13, I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar. Now he is there. Arise, leave this land, return to the land of your birth. So Rachel and Leah said, do we still have a portion or inheritance in our father's house? So we see here in this chapter of 31, their departure Rachel stole as she left. She took away something very important. There was a household idol there in verse 19. There were small figures of female deities. Now, the reason why Rachel had them, number one, they were supposed to guarantee fertility. Remember, she was barren. This is also a tendency in the spiritual realm that prevails among Christians. They live in fear, so they get a laughing Buddha and they keep in the house. Nice laughing Buddha with a, they get him and keep him there because he will take care of all the evil in the house. So, number one, why did Rachel have this? They were supposed to guarantee fertility. Number two, they guaranteed Jacob's right to Laban's estate when he died. Because it is possible that Laban may have given them to her. 3. In some way, Rachel depended on them for the purpose of divination or for realizing God's purposes in her life. Now, there is a statement made here in verse 27 of 30. But Laban said to him, if now it pleases you, stay with me. I have divined that the Lord has blessed me on account of you. That word divined is a word of divination. Whenever divination is mentioned, it's always mentioned with the occult, with sorcery, you understand that? With the spirit world. So it is possible there in that family, there is this whole aspect of household idols that are used in divination, and Rachel is the one that has maybe the familiar deity of the house. When she leaves, she is taking that familiar deity, because this is what demons do. They produce attachments. Demons produce attachments. Now, instead of depending upon God by faith, they are depending upon divination. They are depending upon divination. In the book of Deuteronomy, in the 18th chapter, when you enter the land which the Lord your God gives you, you shall not learn to imitate the detestable things of those nations. Deuteronomy 18 verse 9. There shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or daughter pass through the fire, one who uses divination, one who practices witchcraft, one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, one who casts a spell, or a medium, or a spiritist, or one who calls up the dead. For whoever does these things is detestable to the Lord, and because of these detestable things, the Lord your God will drive them out before you. You shall be blameless before the Lord your God, for those nations which you shall dispossess, listen to those who practice witchcraft and to diviners, but as for you, the Lord your God has not allowed you to do so. Is that clear? Deuteronomy 18, 9 to 14 is a very specific injunction by Moses, telling them how when you come into the land, there are these practices in Canaan that they will practice. I do not want you to enter into that place. Now, at the second cross, Hutchins Road, right at the end of that cross, there is one beautiful small little worship center in which everybody is there. Buddha is there, Mary is there, Jesus is there, and everybody else is there, and you can go in and you can put your hand, light a candle and agarbatti or whatever it is, and you can have everyone come in front of you. You will see tremendous visions there. I asked the person when I first came to Bangalore, I said, what is this? And he says, when you go there, you find tremendous peace. I said, which one should I talk to here? This whole ecumenical movement will culminate in Revelation 17 verses 1 to 5. There you have the woman riding the beast. That's a marriage there of the political system and the religious system in chapter 17, of the book of Revelation. We see that it's happening. This ecumenism. Today you see when you go to Lingashpuram and all these other places you pass by, you see Mary, and then you see Ganesha, and you see someone else, all in one poster. 3 in 1. Like the CD player, the tape player, and something else. You see, and it's all normal and everything is fine and everyone dancing around it and everything else. And people actually don't know how these forms of art are coming into being. Everyone thinks it's all, we should live in harmony together. Deuteronomy 18 troubles me because God said that you shall not practice those things that these people practice. So, but here Rachel is taking something with her when she goes. Now, in verse 32 of chapter 31, one of those with whom you find your gods shall not live. In the presence of our kinsmen, point out what is yours among my belongings and take it for yourself. For Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. Laban is very much attached to these idols. In conflict in cultures that are demonized, we read stories of how the power of God has broken the demonic strongholds in these places. You see that in 1 Kings 17 and 18, when Dagon is turned upside down. Remember the story? They woke up the next day and Dagon had fallen down. Who pushed him? Elijah came in the night and pushed him. The power of God has done it. These practices, they cannot be overcome by human behavior. They can only be broken by the power of God. When a conversion takes place, it has not taken place because of human persuasion. It has taken place by the power of God. I am troubled when people conform to Christianity in human behavior. They are not converted in their hearts. They are conforming to human behavior. They are conforming to human vocabulary. They are conforming to Christian practices. They are conforming, but they are not truly converted in their hearts. The Spirit of God brings in a conversion. The Spirit of God brings in a conversion in the heart of man. There is a conversion only after there has been a conviction. There is a conviction, then there is a conversion. Without a conviction, there cannot be contriteness. Without a conviction, there cannot be any form of contriteness. Without contriteness, there cannot be a turning back to God. Without contriteness, there cannot be a turning back to God. So we see here the household article, T-E-R-A-P-H-I-M. Rachel stole it in verse 19 of chapter 31. She hid it in a saddle, 34. And so we see that they leave. Now, the question is, God speaking, Laban was told on the third day that Jacob had fled. So he took his kinsmen, verse 22. Now one thing Jacob should have done is Jacob should have told him that he was leaving. You have to give your resignation before you leave. But God told Laban, here it says in verse 24, God came to Laban the Aramean, chapter 31, 24, and said, be careful that you do not speak to Jacob, either good or bad. Laban said to Jacob, what have you done by deceiving me and carrying away my daughters like captives of the sword? Why did you flee secretly and deceive me and did not tell me, so that I might have sent you away with joy and with song and with timbrel and with lyre? What a wonderful statement. Why didn't you tell me? I would have sent you with song, with joy, with timbrel, with lyre. and you did not allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Now you have done foolishly. It is in my power to do you harm, but God, the God of your father, he didn't say God my father, the God of your fathers, spoke to me last night saying, be careful not to speak either good or bad to Jacob. Now you have indeed gone away because you long greatly for your father's house. But why did you steal my? Do you think at this point of time, like Laban would have got the point? Laban has come after him for his household deities. When I was a new believer, don't get upset with me. When I would visit some of my friends' places and I would share the gospel and we would go, when I would leave, I would take some of their deities and go. Laughing Buddhas and other things, I would take it and go. And I would just basically get rid of it. And they would hysterically search for it. Sometimes whenever we'd go to their places, they'd clear their whole living room for these things because they knew we would take things away. Was one of the things that we used to do. But afterwards we were told not to do it because we almost got into trouble one day. But this is it. I understand that you were after your father's house, but why did you steal my gods? 20 years Jacob spent in whose house? Do you think every day there was a worship service before these things? Remember, he repeats this word, deceive. Why did you deceive me? Who has deceived whom here? On what basis has Jacob left? Jacob has left on the basis of the command of the Lord in 31:3. Jacob has left on the basis of now whether it was right to tell Laban or not, that was another thing. I'm sure he must go to his father-in-law and communicate it. But he has left on the basis of a command from God. So, Rachel had stolen it. Here we see in 29, there's a warning to Laban. These 20 years I have been with you. There was not one miscarriage of any animal, nor have I eaten the rams of your flocks. I bore the loss of the wild beasts when they tore down any of the animals. By day the heat consumed me, by night and the frost by night, and my sleep fled from my eyes. These 20 years I have been in your house. I have served you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flock. And you've changed my wages 10 times. He keeps talking about it. God has to change his frame of reference here. Now he says, if the God of my fathers, the God of Abraham and the fear of Isaac had not been for me, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God has seen my affliction, verse 42, and toil of my hands. So he rendered judgment last night. What has God seen? My affliction and the toil of my hands. Let us allow God to vindicate us in every situation. Let us allow God to vindicate us in every situation. Okay? Now he makes a covenant here, 44 to 55. They made a covenant. It's called, what is that? Non-proliferation treaty, no? Where you disarm all nuclear weapons. This is a non-aggression pact, verse 44 to 55. Laban and Jacob made a mutual non-aggression pact. Number 1, it featured God as a witness, 49 and 53. May the Lord watch between you and me when we are absent one from another. The God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. So Jacob swore. Here it is, the pillar, and was a heap. In verse 52, the heap is a witness, and the pillar is a witness that I will not pass by this heap to you for harm, and you will not pass this heap and this pillar to me for harm. Now they are making a non-aggression pact because they do not know when each of them is going to snap and come after the other person. Do you know this kind of pact will be made in the tribulation period, in the middle of the 3.5 years between the Antichrist? He makes a pact for 7 years, and in the middle of the 7 years, he breaks that pact. We see this covenant meal to seal the arrangement, verse 54. They offered a sacrifice on the mountain and called his kinsmen to the meal, and they ate and spent the night on the mountain. But there was one thing that permeated the entire arrangement, and what was that? Suspicion, verse 50. This entire agreement of peace is made with an attitude of suspicion. Wouldn't that be great? In verse 50, look at it. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you take wives besides my daughters, although no man is with us, see, God is my witness between you and me. He's saying that if you mistreat my daughters, may the Lord watch between you and me, and when we are absent. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you take wives besides my daughters, although no man is with us, see, God is witness between you and me. He's saying, just be careful. The whole arrangement is made on the basis of suspicion. This is when two people are sitting down together and making a covenant with each other, and they both know that both of them at some point of time are not going to keep the covenant. Is there a covenant that is sanctified by God? Humanly speaking, they do everything together. They enact the whole procedure, but divinely speaking, they are not really doing it in an honor code way. So we see here, there is a witness in verse 47. Jegar, Shaduta and Gilead both mean a heap of witness. The former is an Aramic word, and the latter is a Hebrew word, Mizpah, which means watchtower, in verse 49. So he said, may the Lord watch between you and me when we are absent from one another. So this is the pact that they make. Now here in verse 35, Laban disappears from the scene at this point, and there is no further record of him contacting Jacob's family and his relatives in Mesopotamia in verse 35. Is that clear? So we'll end there. After all this has happened, the manner in which the departure took place was not a pleasant one. The manner in which the departure took place was not a pleasant one. Jacob did not consider it right to leave Laban, so he never told him. But the Lord has intervened here in verse 24 of chapter 31. And the Lord has told Laban the Aramean in a dream. Now I want you to understand, as you study the scriptures, that God does in a sovereign way speak to people that are not connected with His covenant. He does it in His sovereignty. Did He speak to Abimelech regarding Sarah? Did He speak to Abimelech regarding Rebekah, the king of Gerar? Yes or no? Did He speak to Nebuchadnezzar in a dream? Okay, don't put it when people are moved by God in His sovereignty. Now I understand there is a balance there. Like sometimes people say, God said this, God said that, God said, God said. We check it out through the Word. But God has a way by which He can get the attention of people, because He does not want them to be destroyed. He does it because He wants to preserve. Second, He does it because He wants to warn. And three, He does it because He wants to bless. Preserve, warn, and bless. Here he's telling Laban in a dream, be careful that you do not speak to Jacob anything good or bad. God has spoken to Laban. God need not come to Laban, but God has spoken and says, don't touch this guy Jacob, whatever it is. I don't want you to say anything. And Laban acknowledges it here. Acknowledges it. And he says very clearly, if the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been for me, surely now you would have sent me away. Jacob is saying, empty-handed. God has seen my affliction and toiled of my hands. So he rendered judgment last night. So we see that God is the one that intervened on Jacob's behalf. Whom did he speak to? Laban. And what did he tell Laban? Stay out. And here is a covenant that is made in verse 44 onwards. Let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. And then he says, let God be the witness. Verse 49, may the Lord watch between you and me when we are absent one from the other. So a covenant is made here. It was a covenant that was mutually made, and it involved God as a witness. There were boundary lines in verse 52. The arrangement was sealed through a meal, verse 54. There was suspicion that permeated the entire covenant, verse 50. Is it clear? And we see Laban completely departing from the scene in verse 55. Okay? So we close there. What ended up to be a few days ended up to be 20 years. What ended up to be a few days ended up to be 20 years. Is Jacob regretting the decision that he made? Now we see in chapter 2 his reconciliation in chapter 2 with Esau, his wrestling with an angel, and then we see the renewal of his covenant. God is renewing his covenant with Jacob in chapter 35, and we come into Joseph's life, 37 to 50. So Jacob still continues on until the end of the chapter, but now this is a very important chapter in 32. I want you to meditate on it. Read chapters 32, because he meets Esau in chapters 33, but I want you to read 32. This is very important, because before there is a confrontation, there is always a visitation. Before there is a confrontation, there is always a what? Visitation. Before Moses went to Egypt to meet Pharaoh, Moses met God on Mount Sinai, correct? Yes or no? So remember this, whenever there is a confrontation, there is a visitation. The visitation in 32 keeps him from the confrontation in chapters 33. So Father, thank you for this class this morning. In Jesus' name, amen.